Hi everyone, this is Elspeth from Change.org. Thanks so much for joining us today for this webinar. Unfortunately, Ben is unwell, so can't be with us today, but we're really lucky to be joined by Julie and Branny. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Julie?
Hi, so I'm Julie Dodd. I'm a digital consultant who works a lot with charities, and I wrote a digital transformation report called The New Reality earlier this year.
Hi, I'm Branny Milosevic. I'm a digital consultant and strategist. I've been working with the charities for over 15 years. Currently, I'm focusing on digital leadership, and I authored the report, The State of Digital Leadership in the Charity Sector.
So just to run you through briefly the agenda that we've got planned for today. So part one from Julie, we're looking at why digital matters now for the social sector. Part two will be over to Branny, looking at digital leadership for successful transformation. And part three, we'll be doing a Q&A with our two guest speakers. So Julie, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to start this session by talking about why digital matters now to the social sector. Over the past decade, we've made, I think, huge strides in our digital capabilities. We've started to grow the digital skills that can bring the social sector into the 21st century. But before we pat ourselves on the back about what we've achieved, I think we need to take a moment and really rethink what digital means to us and our organisations. We can see from the current fundraising scandal how much the sector maybe needs to change, to modernise, and to engage with people in ways that suits them. They're clearly telling us that they're not happy with how we operate. But how? That's a really big challenge. And I think the answer, or a significant part of it, lies in digital and digital transformation. So, the quote you've got on screen now, the only comparable time to this is the Industrial Revolution. It's a quote from my New Reality report. It was one of the sector leaders who said this to me. And it's a really big statement. It maybe sounds a bit of an exaggeration, but I do think this is the kind of scale we're talking about here in terms of how far the social sector needs to shift. There's a lot of talk I'm hearing in the sector about digital transformation right now. But I have to say, a lot of those conversations are not really talking about anything transformational. We're talking a lot about digital in terms of social media tactics, plans for new websites, and those things are important, yes, of course. But it's not the whole picture. In fact, I think it's barely a toe in the ocean of the real impact digital technology can make and will make for forward-thinking non-profit organisations. The key mistake I think some of us are making is that we're distracted by the technology itself, the kit that we're working with. And certainly, some of the kit we've been working with hasn't been fantastic up until now. But this is really a question of culture, organisational change and culture. It's about business transformation. Fundamentally, this is about making sure that the organisations in the world who do real good, the ones that we work for and work with, survive beyond the next 10 years. And I do think it's getting to a point where it's that serious. There's plenty of examples of how digital disruption took a lot of sectors by surprise. Other industries like music and journalism who thought that carrying on doing what they were doing would last forever. And now this digital disruption is knocking on the social sector's door. So why is it that it's changing now? So on screen you can see sort of an illustration of three separate things going on. The first of which being increased mobility of services. It's no surprise we're all quite addicted to our handheld devices. And what that's done is it's created a kind of level of accessibility of technology for people that on the one hand is very leveling and on the other is a real behaviour changer. The two pictures in the centre represent a cross-generational behaviour change. So we see really young people touching TV screens and wondering why they don't work, because screens are all ways to engage with brands these days. And at the bottom we see older generations who are finding that actually technology is so usable now and so familiar that it's no longer a barrier to doing the things that they want to. This is really for everyone. The third image on the right is of a 3D It's kind of a shorthand for the new raft of kinds of technologies that are emerging. So it often sounds like buzzwords: 3D printing, Internet of Things, wearables. But there's some real examples of how these things are fundamentally changing the world. And I think we're getting to a position where there's a question for us in the social sector. Is this an unprecedented opportunity to deliver greater impact? Or is this a huge risk to the future of our organisations? Now, I'm going to hand this question over to you. I'm really interested in what you, the audience, have to think about this. We're going to give you a quick poll. So if you can, whilst you're hopefully seeing on screen, quickly answer this question about whether you think it's an opportunity, a risk, or a mix of both. And we're going to see what you think. So we can see the answers coming in now on our screens. And what we can see is a lot in the opportunity column and a lot in the mix of both. Not too many people saying they think it's a huge risk. I think they're obviously a very optimistic bunch. But yeah, I think it's like all good essay questions, a little from A and a little from B. There is both sides of this coin. During the New Reality research that I did, I heard a lot about this balancing of risk and opportunity. And what I'm going to do now is talk about a few of the biggest opportunities that I think digital technology offers and what the associated risk is. So the first opportunity that I think really emerged from the New Reality was this one. There's an opportunity right now for us to find better, leaner ways to deliver the core missions. Technology offers us a chance to change how we do things. That's everything from our internal processes and infrastructure to the way that we deliver services to the beneficiaries and audiences we want to reach. Many of the contributors to the New Reality told me that this was a unique chance, a really rare moment in time to step back and refocus on what we're really trying to achieve. That means asking some tough questions, and that's about questioning whether we're doing things in the best way possible. For your organisation, if it was set up right now with the digital tools at our fingertips and with audiences behaving through mobile devices and all different technologies, would you do things differently? Many organisations I work with, when asked this question, they say that they would change quite a lot. So what's stopping us from doing it? Well, I think it's the risk. So the risk on this slide, that we remain tied to onerous processes, systems and people that hold us back. The waste and thought of changing those things is preventing us from leaping into the next stage of development for the social sector. But I'm going to talk about one organisation who I think has really grasped this opportunity. So on screen you can see a quote from the corporate strategy from the British Red Cross. They have decided to really put digital technology at the heart of what they're doing as an organisation. They say, digital technology offers us new ways to work, to influence and engage with people, and to develop and deliver services. That's a very bold statement to have in the central corporate strategy. It's not just in some sideline digital strategy, it is the heart of what they're doing. They've gone beyond that. They have 6 pillars that fundamentally part of what they're going to do in the next 4 years. One of those 6 is use technology to help people. That's the level of bravery and boldness we need to be putting into our corporate strategies. That is the representation of how we're going to make digital really help us fulfill our organisational missions. So the opportunity there to find better ways to deliver our core mission is certainly something digital technology can help with. The second opportunity that was really emphasised to me during the New Reality research was about ways of reaching new people and more people, thanks to the changing and growing methods of communication. At the moment, I see and hear a lot about the risk on this slide. Excuse me. The risk that we're trying and failing to cling on to existing support. I've read umpteen strategies, I have to say, that say we'll invest in digital, but you know what, let's keep doing direct marketing because we know what the returns are. And I see so many comforting pie charts that show how much legacy income brings in. But that's not going to be the case in 10 years. And what we can see, it's in all the papers again today, that people are no longer prepared to continue with the fundraising tactics that the sector has been using. And in a society where digital technology is fueling an increased pace of change, we must find new ways of engaging, because the ways we've got at the moment are a bit limiting. This risk is so important that I want to share an example of how we can move past it. So, what we've got on screen at the moment is an example from the BBC. So the BBC achieved something that many established aid organisations failed to do during the Ebola crisis. It launched its Ebola Lifeline WhatsApp service and managed to get over 20,000 subscribers in a very short space of time in areas of West Africa, particularly Sierra Leone, where on-the-ground teams just were not getting there, they were struggling to reach. They did this in response to the vacuum of information about how to safely control the spread of the disease. The service was really simple. It provided text in English and French, audio, advice, and simple infographics. And what that delivered was a service that fundamentally changed the way that people were reacting, responding around Ebola, stopping the spread. Now that's an inspiring example in and of itself. Raising awareness of Ebola and stopping the spread of a disease in crisis is an amazing thing. But I think this example is really amazing for another reason, and that's because it used an existing technology to do it. The BBC understood that WhatsApp offered rapid, low-cost access to people whom non-profits have historically really found it difficult to reach. And I think this demonstrates that there isn't necessarily the need to invest in expensive custom development. One of those barriers, the sense that digital is an expensive way of reaching people, is proven not to be true here. The third opportunity that I want to talk about, and I think it's probably the most important of all, is the ability to give people the tools to solve their own problems. This is really a cultural thing, I think, for the social sector. We've maybe been guilty, or at least naive, of thinking that people need us still to act on their behalf. That's certainly true for some things, but access to digital technology is showing us that people want to do things for themselves. Digital offers people the opportunity to self-serve. It's what the government digital service programme was all about. It's also been illustrated through things like the rise of the sharing economy, services like Airbnb or Casserole Club. It's illustrated through crowdfunding platforms. People are managing to raise money from product launches through to medical treatment. And it's even shown through the very simple things like the ability to access benefits online. It certainly appears that when you give people the chance to do things for themselves via digital, they take it. The risk here is that challenger brands are going to step in and do this. It's certainly what happened in other industries. Spotify, Airbnb, even Amazon stepped in and changed sectors in fundamental ways when they stepped in. It hasn't happened yet in the social sector, but I think it's very, very, very close. And perhaps we can avoid that if the established non-profit organisations start providing tools to people rather than trying to hold hands. I want to finish on one example from the new reality that I found really inspiring around this. So the image on screen is of a favela in Rio, in Brazil. A recent project that Google were working on took them to a favela like this, and they were investigating what the impact of internet connectivity would be in areas like this. What they found there was a hive of internet-based industry. On one floor, in just a small set of buildings, they found a full digital radio station being run. They found 2 cyber cafes that had fairly high-grade computer systems. They found a big hotel that had been turned into a community hall where they were running computer science classes for schools. There was another room in that building where Coca-Cola was sponsoring digital marketing classes. And there was a building next door where a women's collective were running an online-only fashion business that had become so successful they were shipping internationally. This is what happens when you give people digital technology. They leapfrog. As soon as you have access to cheap tech, you can change your own life. So maybe we need to ask what it might be like to empower people to achieve our missions for us, rather than focusing on doing it for them. And this is why digital is so much more than a channel. if we continue to think about it as a series of social media strategies and websites, we'll never unleash its full potential, and someone else might come along and do that for us. I'm going to hand over to Branny, who's going to talk about the most fundamental thing here. We can't do any of this unless we have strong leadership in the sector. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Julie. So what I want to start with is with a statement that I've developed over the years working with the charities and in the charity sector, and that is that whether big or small, the organizations need digital leaders to guide the organization and its senior management through the process of the digital change and digital transformation to identify the most strategically valuable vision for digital in that organization, and also the commitment needed to implement that vision. And I suppose the most important part of this statement is that beginning, that whether big or small. So this applies to all charities, and it's not necessarily based on income, it's based on the priorities and the prioritization within the organization. The reason when people start looking at the digital transformation and change in the organization, obviously you will be looking at the systems that you have, you will be looking at data sets you have, strategies and processes that you have. But one of the most important analyses that you need to do is of the people that are and with digital skills that you have in the organization, because those are the people who will be helping the organization move through the process of the change that digital will inevitably incur, because wherever you touch in terms of whether it's technology, whether it's content, whether it's business processing, digital is changing things. That's why it's so transformational. So in order to understand where the sector is at when it comes to digital maturity, what I would call, and digital leadership, I've organized a survey last year, the State of Digital Leadership Survey, and this year we had the second wave of the results, and I want to share some of the results with you because they kind of give a pretty good indication of where we are as a sector. So before I go into we're going to do a poll now, actually, before I do the reveal. So if you can tell me how many people do you have in your digital teams, and we can get those results in, and then I'll share with you what the digital leadership State of Digital Leadership Survey has found.
Interesting.
So it looks like we have, I can already see this looks a little bit better than what we had before. Sorry, we're still waiting for the. So it looks like most of the people on this call will have between 5 and 10 people in the digital team. We will share these results later, so this was just to kind of give us a bit of a taster. Only 3 have no digital people or digital teams. These are the results that came up in the survey, in the State of Digital Leadership Survey that was conducted in April, May this year. As you can see, a picture here is slightly different to what we saw in your poll. Basically, in your poll, it doesn't look like that many people have 4 people. It sounds like 4 it's either 3 or 5, basically. But this was mostly kind of equally divided between small charities and bigger charities. What is the most disturbing thing for me here is that there is so many people who actually have no digital teams in their organization. In today's world, this is really concerning, and the small budgets or small income cannot be a justification for that. I've also asked the question. The survey also asked the question about the people in digital teams in digital roles in other teams. Oh, sorry, no, we skipped that one. This is the digital team, the question about the digital team roles, apologies. So this is again to understand what kind of roles organizations invest in, what kind of digital roles organizations invest in. As you can see, the most excitement we get is for social media roles, and that's totally not surprising. There is a lot of excitement around social media, both on the grassroots level as well as on the senior managers level. Sometimes you will hear social media being used instead of digital, like social media is the only thing that digital teams do. What is also an interesting thing to see here is the proliferation of digital managers is obviously pretty high, as well as content roles such as web editor and digital writer. What I'm again slightly concerned about is that digital directors or heads of digital are not that many. There are not that many of them around, and in comparison to last year's survey, this picture looks more or less the same. So basically, the sector hasn't really moved on very far in terms of building digital roles and digital leaderships within the organizations. The other thing that the survey is looking at, again, all to kind of evaluate the state of digital leadership in the sector, is around digital integration. So the question that was asked there was about digital being represented in planning processes around big organizational initiatives. And this is actually probably one of the highlights of this year's survey. So this is where the change has happened. As you can see here, 45% of people said that they're always involved in these kind of planning processes. Last year, it's only 25% of people who said this. And that is one of the highlights of this survey. 52% are still saying that they're involved sometimes, which obviously is still a concern because it's a considerable amount of people. But there is obviously a change there. I just want to share another question that we asked, which is around. So this is another question that we have. Which is around your capacity of your CEO to behave as a head of digital. I'll explain why we're asking this question. So we're just trying to see what the results are here before we move on. No, that is okay. Sorry, apologies. This was we had issues with technology here. Moving on. So basically, on the other question that you were asking is around digital influence, and this is a very, very important question and it was a very complex question as well, because what I was trying to understand here is how much influence digital teams have in decision-making processes in the organization. So there was a set of different questions, so which are implying that, or statements which are implying that people are leading digital, strategic and operational levels, so they are making they're part of decision making as well as delivering the digital product. On the other hand, where digital is involved only at the end of the planning process, so that's your usual when the whole planning process has been completed and then people just come to the digital team and say, can you please now deliver this? The other options were about leading digital only on operational level, and obviously the option of having no digital team or no digital lead. Again, this shows a slightly better picture than last year, actually a significantly better picture than last year, where 40% of people said that they're leading both on strategic and the operational level. Which is increase to 40%. Last year that was 23%. So that is a really, really positive thing. Again, like before, what is concerning that there is still 41% of people who are being brought in only at the end of the planning process. The way I read this and the previous slide that we were looking at on digital integration is that organizations are obviously trying to make baby steps to integrate digital more in the organization, but these are not transformative. These are basically a kind of as much as we can do without actually changing anything significantly. So it's a kind of good direction of travel. It's good to see it happening, but more needs to happen for digital to be really transformative to the organization and help the organization reach its objectives. So moving on from that, so those are just some taster of the results of the State of Digital Leadership survey, you can see the whole survey and all the results in the report. But one of the things that is also that I've heard as a challenge to digital leadership in the organizations is this impression that digital people are very hard to come by, they're very expensive, and we are actually, as a charities, we are competing with the Silicon Roundabout because that's where all the digital brain is. I actually haven't found that. Whenever I've worked with any organization, whether I was a peer from a different organization or as a consultant, I always found that organizations do have digital leads and do have people who understand digital and who understand what the organization needs to do. And more importantly, they have organizational history and culture background, which means that they can actually advise the organization how to best transform, knowing its limitations and knowing its culture. So these people exist in organizations. I don't think that we need to go and seek them out in the Silicon Roundabout. What we do need to do and where we do need to invest is to invest in these existing digital leads to develop them into leaders, because all of them because we are just not nurturing them in such way. Usually digital leads are on the lower levels of the hierarchy and are being sometimes consulted, but then their views and their knowledge is being transferred to higher level organizations by their line managers or by other people who don't necessarily totally have the appreciation and understanding of what the recommendation was. So what I am really feeling passionate about is that we really need to invest in these digital leads, invest in their digital leadership skills, and that means investment in helping them develop a digital strategy, investing them in helping them develop their influencing skills and the leadership skills. And sometimes this is not just done by sending them on a course or getting them a mentor, which obviously both are very, very valuable things. But sometimes it's being done by actually getting them to learn from their mistakes. And that means that senior leaders would be bringing digital leads into important decision-making meetings where that digital knowledge is needed. If that lead does make a mistake, then just basically help them learn from it rather than totally ostracize them from the senior levels of the organization. Because that's the only way sometimes that's the best way for digital leads to learn how to influence up. If we don't do this, senior managers are basically losing a very, very valuable knowledge and input into the decision-making process. Close to the end, I just want to refer to this fantastic slide I saw in Julie's report, The New Reality, with this quote: "Until we are further along the road of this transformation, your CEO is your head of digital." I thought that was a really fantastic statement and a very challenging statement, because it is true that when we are talking about digital transformation, it does touch every part of the organization, and the senior levels of the organization really, really need to be leading it and be at the front of it. But we also know that most of the senior managers will not feel confident to do this because they will not feel that they have the capacity or understanding or knowledge to do this, which is why digital leads are a really important part of the organization, part of this process. They are the people who can support senior managers, support the CEO in leading this change and leading the digital transformation. So just on the kind of last note, the conclusion of this of the piece on digital leadership is just to kind of repeat a few things. That digital leads, the most cost-effective and resilient way to change is from within. The aim should be to empower digital leads as individuals inside charities, and to look beyond their focus on delivery, which is what a lot of digital leads have to do because of the lack of time and resources they have, and set them and recognize their potential as a change agents and leaders, and develop them and their potential as change agents and leaders. But at the same time, And this is an area that I haven't spoken about much now, but it's another part of this whole digital leadership thing that I do through Digital Leadership Forum. It's about supporting digital leads to become better influencers and become better leaders, because a lot of the times, because of the frustrations and the challenges that the digital leads find themselves under, they will get into the mentality of management doesn't get it, which isn't really helpful when you're trying to take the whole organization with you on the route to digital transformation. So the development of the growth of skills needs to happen both ways. So the digital leaders need to suit up, skill up, and step up, and the organizations need to support them in developing the skills. So that is where I will end. I believe we're going into questions now.
Yeah, we will. And I think just as a final note on all of this, so Branny's just painted a really strong picture of what is happening around digital talent within the industry. And hopefully at the start I gave a bit of a picture of how important the need for us to move swiftly in digital transformation is. We're really interested in your perspective and your questions on all of that. But I think we would like to leave you all with a kind of renewed vigour for taking to your leaders in your organisations the message that digital is not a channel. It's about how the whole organisation runs, and that we need to empower the people in the organisation who can bring that change about. Thanks.
So, Julie, Branny, thank you so much. Some really, really interesting stuff there, and some really exciting stuff for us all to take away. As you know, Change.org, a huge part of our mission is helping non-profits embrace the digital revolution in order to better achieve their fundraising and advocacy goals. So for us, this has been such a fascinating presentation from both of you. So now we're turning the tables and we're opening it up to Q&A. So if you want to type any of your questions into the chat function, we'll be taking those from now. So I'm just going to pop over to the first question for Julie and Branny. So this is for both of you. So Julie, you briefly touched on this, but who's doing it right and who's doing it wrong?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think probably Branny and I have both got answers to that question. We work with a lot of organisations of different sizes in the sector. And I have to say, from my perspective, what I see is the organisations who I think are getting this right are the ones who at the moment are taking the right mindset, who have the right attitude. I think we're in a position where there is no one organisation who's miles ahead of anyone else, and it's a really different thing for each organisation what they need to do. But the organisations that I've worked with who I think are really getting this, people like the British Red Cross, people like British Heart Foundation, the RSPB, all of those of the larger established non-profits are actively going around about putting this into process. They are building long-term strategies that will make this part of what they do in their organisations. I also see quite a lot of small organisations who are adopting a sort of more lean and agile process way of working so that they can move faster to keep up with the pace of change. That's the other thing for me that is, those are the organisations that I think are going to thrive in the next 10 years. I don't know, Branny, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I get asked this question as well. I think again, my examples are Macmillan and Cancer Research UK and Save the Children, so really big organisations. But I think that it is about the attitude and the decision that this is something we need to do because this is where the market is going, and that is why the investment is happening. Because obviously the fact that they're big organisations with these big budgets doesn't really make any difference, because they would be spending that money on something else if they didn't believe that digital is important. So as far as and this is obviously as far as I understand the processes that are happening in those organisations. When it comes to small organisations, I think that, which kind of relates to what you were saying, Julie, it is a matter of prioritisation and decision. It's not necessarily about the budget, because I have seen charities, small charities, putting £25,000 a year into PR, knowing for sure that they are at best going to get a line in the letters to editors once or twice a year. if we ask them for £25,000 to build a website, which is a window to the rest of the world, and it's basically a shop window, it's a brand presence for the rest of the world, they would be shocked and they would be absolutely mortified by the suggestion. So there is something about, it's not necessarily about money. It is about the culture, and it is about the strategic thinking and winning that within the organisation.
Yeah. Actually, Shirley's just asked a sort of additional question to this, which is, in terms of organisations doing this properly, what was their journey to make this change? I think that's a really great question. So the organisations that I work with who are getting somewhere along this journey, let me think of a specific example. So I would say, Macmillan is a great example of an organisation that's doing this well. And yes, they're a big organisation that has, a reasonable amount of buffer in their income. But putting that to one side, they decided to invest really heavily in a skills program. That's where they decided to start this journey. They have built in a cross-organisation skills training program. They started, I think, with social media skills because they understood how much of an impact that could make from them. I think Amanda Nayland, who's their head of digital, said to me, we used to have 3 people doing social media effectively, now we've got 1,000. And when you think about it in those terms, you can see the difference in scale that skilling up an organisation around digital capability makes. On a similar note, I'm working with Safe Lives, the domestic violence charity, and they are looking at both the big picture opportunities that technology can make for them, but also around helping their staff feel really comfortable with digital in their own working lives. So it's as much about digital operations internally in an organisation. It's not just about the kind of the rush to external services, and they really understand that. So I think skill building and digital capability is often the right place. Other organisations I've worked with have done it through starting with their internal infrastructure. So actually, where so much time, effort, energy and distraction going into some big legacy system, could be, one of the big fundraising systems, could be a CRM thing, could be, even the internal HR system. Dealing with that, getting out of bad supply contracts, frees up the time and space to think and then to act on doing things. So a lot of the time, organisations who are getting somewhere are working out what they can stop doing in order to make room to start doing new stuff. And I think that's really fundamental too.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing, which again is going back to kind of cultural and more kind of strategic. What I'm noticing about all these organizations is that their obsession with the supporter, and it is that focus on how can we service our customers, supporters, depends on the type of the organization, best. Putting the supporter in the center basically turns the whole organization around, because we have been broadcasting information one way for 40, 50 years. Now all of a sudden that world has changed. And I think the organizations who understood that and who are not fighting it is the organizations who are getting furthest with this digital transformation.
Yeah, we've got a really interesting question here from Zoe. What's the best example you've seen of charity giving supporters digital tools for them to use for themselves?
So yeah, helping people help themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really critical one. There's a slightly depressing answer to this question, which is I've seen loads of examples of it. I've seen hardly any examples from charities. So there are amazing examples of little startups, social enterprises doing this. There's a really amazing little company who do 3D printing for prosthetic limbs, who have gone out to Syria and Sudan, and they are 3D printing prosthetic limbs for about 40 quid a pop, in comparison to a normal prosthetic limb, which will cost you about £20,000. Because obviously the issues in conflict regions mean that there's a lot of people who have lost their limbs. Somebody going out with a 3D printer to help people get on with their own lives, that's definitely one, not coming from an existing charity. There's all sorts of stuff going on around that. In terms of charity examples, there's another Macmillan one, and they're certainly not the only charity doing innovative stuff. But their Team Up service, which is in trial at the moment, it's a sharing economy platform where people in a very local area can match up with other people going through cancer experiences in their area to kind of help them out. So say you have been going through cancer treatment and it's difficult for you to just do some of your daily tasks at the moment. So you're shopping, picking up your prescription, you're dog walking. You can be matched up with someone in your area. Rather than having to go to Macmillan and then providing that service at great expense, you're just being hooked up with someone in your local area and building a stronger sense of community, that kind of thing. The sharing economy example is a really great way of looking at this. But sadly, there's not enough coming out of the sector. It's coming from outside.
Yeah, I know. I mean, the examples I will give are very old, actually, and it was when mobile phones became really big in Africa, for example. So there was, at the time, it was called Open Knowledge Network, where people could sign up for mobile phone alerts for small jobs. So it was a kind of microeconomy, and if you're basically looking for a job, so if someone needs their windows washed or their garden cleared up, you would get an alert and you could kind of negotiate the job with the person at the other end. So that then became a social enterprise. And the other, like the use of mobile phones overseas for health purposes. So there was a project that I've seen in Nigeria with the Ministry of Health, where nurses who were going into the remote places in Nigeria to vaccinate children, they would fill in a form on a mobile phone, and this is an old Nokia phone. It's not a smartphone, and that would directly go into a database in the ministry, so they could immediately see the distribution patterns for drugs and where more is needed, and you know, who basically they'll kind of get all the important statistics. The other areas, I mean, those are the examples that I've seen and that I think have worked. But just to Julie's point about there is a bit of the shortage of these kinds of examples in the charity sector. If you think about all the things that we all use, such as Airbnb, Uber, even Red, as in like the when you buy something from Red, the Bono thing, Tom's shoes, eBay. These are all the models of that have transformed different industries. They transformed the retail industry. Obviously everything, Napster in the old days and Apple Music, all the things that have totally transformed the industries that they were attached to, and what I found interesting about it is to see why are they successful. What was it that made them a success? And there are basically three things that made them successful, which is they provide flexibility and convenience to the end user and to the trader. And that is also an end user. They provide a good user experience, so it's really easy to use, it's really easy to make a transaction. But most importantly, they have a very, very strong community around them, around these products, who value the product, who value the services, and basically build a trust in the brand. Because if you remember Airbnb, when it just started, no one was very sure what was going on until reviews started coming in, and that kind of trust was built. And if you think about those three things and try to think about how it works in the charity sector, this is where it becomes obvious why we're not really getting there. It's because we do have a ready-made community of people, but we're kind of mostly freaked out of actually giving them any power to do any kind of involvement in the work we do. We're much more happy to educate rather than to preach, rather than to actually have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Just think about donation forms. It's like mostly a very bad experience, which is what is the user experience is just awful. And sometimes I actually have heard people that our people are just used to this kind of experience from charity websites, which kind of, I suppose, makes it right. This kind of focus on the user and on the supporter is what I think is missing in a lot of organizations, because actually website projects are a perfect example. The moment you start talking about what is going to be the next website for this organization, it's all about who shouts the loudest, it's all about telecommunications. I think that's what's stopping us really get onto this journey, right?
Yeah. So we've got another really interesting question here, touching on something you said, Julie, from Eliza. How are other charities approaching transitioning legacy teams into new structures and ways of thinking?
So how are they going about it? Well, there's a lot of different answers to that question because it really varies on what type of organisation they are. So some of the better examples I've seen are organisations that have started doing kind of collaborative working programs, either as kind of innovation labs or more formally setting up cross-discipline teams and cross-department teams. That's really the key to this, getting departments working together on projects so that they're bringing the best of their expertise to one specific challenge. Shelter have been doing this quite a bit around their projects. They bring together, the head of their helpline, who obviously knows an awful lot about the needs on a day-to-day basis, with some of their digital teams, some of their kind of internal infrastructure teams, to come up with some really great new ways of doing things. So that kind of cross-department, finding projects to take people out of their little silos, I think is probably the most important thing in that. And the other thing is kind of what we said before about skills training. The more comfortable, as you say, legacy teams or teams who haven't traditionally worked in digital get with digital skills, the more they start operating in a digital way. I think, Diabetes UK have done quite a lot of good work in that area too, making people feel comfortable with digital, stopping digital teams trying to own it. I mean, that is a really significant problem. The digital teams don't want to let go of it. They want it to be theirs. That's really a mistake. It's a huge mistake to do that. Digital technology is empowering the whole organisation. And yes, there are some people who at the moment know more about it, but we need to transition away from that as quickly as possible to a place where it's everyone's responsibility.
And I would just add to that, I suppose the issue is that with some organisations you don't even have a digital team to hold it all together. Yeah. And I think it's a really important point that this kind of mainstreaming of digital, as people say, is a really important trend. But the concern is that some charities kind of skip the centralised approach in order to go into this, everyone can do everything, which basically just leads to chaos because there aren't any systems or processes in place or leadership in place to actually lead this. But clearly, longer term, that's exactly where we should all be.
Yeah, and so one of the ways in which we have seen more and more nonprofits engaging in digital is through email fundraising and email campaigning. And we've got a great question here from Natalie saying, our emails don't perform too well. We have a very traditional supporter base that responds better offline. Do you, Branny and Julie, have any tips for engaging them, and are there do's and don'ts?
So it really depends on who that audience is, because I think there is a risk when we're talking about digital transformation and these digital processes that it sounds like everyone on both sides, everyone in the organisation and all of the audiences must switch to digital immediately. That isn't actually true. So whilst I might criticise direct marketing, and certainly it's getting a lot of flack at the moment, the truth is it does still work for certain audiences. What we're talking about is planning ahead for the future. So the classic audience for direct marketing campaigns, the main place legacy income comes from is from older generations, not uniquely, but largely so. What we'll see in the next kind of 10 to 20 years is the next generations getting older aren't going to have the same amount of available income because of much bigger questions around social inequality at the moment. So that money just isn't going to exist. Direct marketing is effectively starting to be shut down by regulation following the scandal. So it's about starting to look for alternatives. When you've got an audience that hasn't responded well to digital stuff, what you need to do is test. Small tweaks. Tweak the emails, tweak the copy in those kind of things, try a different social channel, see where you get to with it, and incrementally look at whether you can start improving the engagement you're getting through digital channels. That is the only sure way of knowing whether you can get those channels to work for you or not. And I suspect that with that kind of A/B testing or multivariate testing approach, you'll find that it's not a kind of online, offline. It's much more nuanced than that. It's about the tone of the message. It's about the timing of the messaging, and it's those kind of things.
Yeah. And I would also add, it's also a question of how that data is being collected. I mean, this is that question is actually a perfect example of where you think you're asking a simple question about email, but actually you can interrogate every single piece of operation in the organization, which is how the data was collected, when it was collected, were the people welcomed, or was it like, are you emailing people that you collected their data years ago? These are all the different cases that can happen. And as Julie was saying, it definitely isn't about, we are definitely not saying drop everything that was ever done, because we definitely have different policies. It's all about integration. It's about thinking about the next 10 years, the next 20 years, because what's working at the moment, it's clearly not going. I mean, we're already seeing people not necessarily being happy with what we've been doing. So the situation is changing, and we need to be prepared, because this process of transition is not a 6-month process, it's 3 to 5 years. If we don't start now, we will fall over in 5 years' time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of people who've been on the line today will definitely be convinced by the power of digital and the efficacy of the digital transformation. But one of the questions that we've had come in is, what kind of strategy can they use to convince management to invest in digital?
Yeah. Okay, I think there are 2 answers to that. So the first one is just about being human about it, and that sounds really glib, but a lot of success I've had in organisations is just about building that personal relationship before going in with an agenda, and actually just being really clear about the value that you can personally bring into that conversation. Asking for the conversation is funnily enough the thing that happens the least. So there's a lot of worrying about it. There is a lot of that, like, management aren't listening to this. But actually, I often talk to people who work in digital teams, and when I ask them, you've actually just gone to whichever director it is and said, you know what, I would love to have a conversation over coffee with you about this. I've got some ideas. When you ask them that, I often get a kind of slightly embarrassed, no, I haven't actually asked for the conversation. So step 1, ask for the conversation. The bigger answer there is around evidence. So one of the many things that digital does well is gather data. It means taking the time to be really structured and organised around building a kind of business case, the proof. Pull out the proof from your analytics, pull out the proof from how your social channels are working, pull out some anecdotal feedback from beneficiaries or supporters about how things have been made easier. Look into how much changes in your infrastructure systems, when they are done well through digital, have made to efficiency, and go in with that case. It needs to be taken away from being about, I'm right, you're wrong. It's not about emotions. It's about, look, I can prove that this works. And if you haven't got that proof case, start building it before you try and have that conversation. Try and do, again, some testing. Compare one thing with another, a little change, and show that. Because then you've got, the evidence you need. Management aren't willfully resisting digital. They just want to work off things that they know will work, because everybody is very conscious about where money gets spent. So make it easy for them. Find the evidence first, and then take it to them.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that. It is, it's all very similar, but it is all about building that trust, and it is. And in my experience, I would say that evidence is not necessarily the answer always, because it's still a leap of faith, because we still cannot prove everything. So a lot of the times it's about building that trust, so that they trust that you know what's going on, and you demonstrated that you have the best interest of the organization, and that you know your thing, and you're bringing in the right people, so they will follow you because they trust that you know what you're doing. And that is a long-term process. Clearly, it's not going to happen overnight. So, but I totally subscribe to what Julie said about not making it emotional and making it, oh, you're stupid and I'm intelligent. It is about the benefit of the organization. The last thing that I just want to add to that is, I think that from things I've heard from senior managers, I think that sometimes the strategic digital is actually not strategic, it's tactical. So when we're talking about digital strategy, what they actually are basically the implementation plans. So it's like a social media plan, this is what we're going to be doing, this is our email plan. That's not a digital strategy. That doesn't demonstrate to the senior management or to the team how whatever you're doing on email is contributing to organizational objectives. So it needs to be more top level. And the last thing is just bringing in the right people. So don't try to do it all on your own. There are people from other organizations who can kind of come and do presentations to show what they're doing. There are consultants, agencies, etc. That is, while I'm against agencies coming in, doing the digital strategy and leading the organization with the implementation without any kind of buy-in, at the same time they can really be helpful to help digital leads form the digital vision that the whole organization can buy into and they can implement.
Yeah, I completely agree. Bringing in some external people of different varieties, ask any of the big tech players if they'll come and do a session, or, ask consultants to come in and do a presentation. It does really get people thinking differently, and then you can follow up on it with what it really means to your organisation. Definitely.
But it's totally essential that there is an internal leadership, that there is internal lead that everyone knows that that's your stall. You set up your stall and this is what you're doing.
Yeah, so we've probably only got time for one question now. So I want to enable everyone to go away with sort of one practical step. So the question that we've had come in is, what is the first step in digital transformation? What can people take away as their first action from this webinar?
My advice would be the first step is if there isn't a digital lead in the organization, that's the first step. Find it, employ them, grow the person that we have internally to become that, then start looking at your digital strategy, which is not a digital plan, but actually corresponds to organizational digital strategy. Because each organization, as Julie was saying earlier on, each organization is different, and what needs to be tackled first is going to be different from one organization to another.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, I agree, I think that is the first step. You have to have skills and leadership, and once you've got that, the next thing I would say is to work out what you're going to stop doing. Mm-hmm. So this is a big change happening right now, and that means you can't just carry on fitting in amongst business as usual, or extremely busy professional life, not going to work. So that means tough decisions about things that you're going to stop. What isn't really performing, what isn't really delivering against the core mission, and I mean that at all levels of an organisation. That has to be the next thing. What are you going to stop to make room to do this?
Mm-hmm. Branny, Julie, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure the first step in many people's journeys towards digital transformation. So I just want to thank you again for coming in and sharing all your knowledge with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And to everyone listening, we'd all love to hear more from you, hear feedback. So I've put our contact details for Julie and Branny up on the screen now, and we'll be sharing a recording of this with all of you by the end of the week. So thanks everyone for listening, and thanks Julie and Branny.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.